Welcome back to Comic Book Straight Talk. This is Dalian.
Harry.
Kenny.
Harrington.
And we are here with the man, the myth, the legend, Mike McCormick, talking about, we've kind of had to go back underground to the basement of Comic Empire because of the Star Labs fiasco. Somebody pushed the red button. So we're going to talk about underground comics today.
Underground.
Underground, yes.
Well, Mike, thanks for coming in and talking on our show here today.
You're more than welcome. Love my undergrounders.
So, who wants to go first? Who has a question for Mike? All right, well, basically, what got you started? We'll just go with you yourself. What got you started into underground comics?
Well, they were like no other comics that you would see, not the ones you're going to see on the newsstands, because they were usually sold in head shops, and I only found one because somebody's older brother had one or something, and I looked at it and I was blown away because the art was different, the stories were different. There was stuff. It's like the comics code was definitely not going to approve these comics. So and of course, as a kid, you're always attracted to the stuff the adults tell you can't look at. So I immediately wanted to check them all out. And a buddy of mine and we would sneak into the head shops even though we were 14 or 15, and they were usually wanting to know what us kids were doing in the shop, and we want to look at the comics, and they were like, oh well, okay, just comic books, okay, no problem. As long as we weren't going to buy bongs and pipes and stuff, I guess it was okay. But he didn't know that those were the worst things in the damn in the store. Can you say damn?
Sure, you can say damn.
Oh, okay. I said damn. I said damn twice, actually.
Now say damn it down.
Damn it down.
Damn it down.
There we go. We got it in there.
Okay. All right.
So you started, you said you're 14.
So I started sneaking into head shops, at early age. Literally would ride our bicycles up to the head shop. That's because we weren't old enough to drive.
Yeah,
And
would that be what, Starship?
that was actually a place called Odyssey Mall.
Odyssey, okay.
Odyssey Mall, which was a waterbed place on the bottom floor, and it had these little narrow stairs you went up, and you got to the head shop up top.
Wow.
And
Bongs and waterbeds.
yeah, there you go.
Waterbeds, wow.
What a natural.
Yeah.
So, and the Starship too. We'd go to Starship because the record we were into records as well, so we were buying a lot of music and just go next door to the head shop there, and then buy them in there too. Nobody ever seemed to care. So, even though they clearly said adults only on the cover, so, so I started buying them early, long before any mainstream books. Although, as you guys know, I like comics of all sorts. So, but Undergrounders are unique, and they're not like really any other comics.
Well, at the age of 15, when you were buying them, you were attracted to the art and, of course, things in there that you wouldn't see normally. But did you understand some of the issues that they were trying to tackle?
Oh, yes. That was the thing about the books. They were really, the creators could do anything they wanted. They had really no editorial control. It was pretty much whatever you wanted to draw, whatever you wanted to say, whatever you wanted to protest against, whatever you wanted to support. You could do a comic on it and be fine and find an audience. Sometimes small audiences. Some guys didn't have any real political motivation at all. They just did the weirdest stuff they could do. And there are some undergrounds out there that are absolutely weird. I mean, they're even too weird for me. They're so weird. So you could do anything you wanted. That was really what appealed to most of the artists and writers, was they had total freedom to do whatever. You want to protest against the war? Fine, protest against the war. You want to support women's lib? Yeah, support women's lib. Women artists too. In fact, that's where a lot of women got started in the comic world, were undergrounds, because anything goes. If you have the talent and you want to do it, you could do it.
Well, where and what kind of started the underground movement?
Well, like I say, all the issues that were coming to the fore in the 60s, women's lib, racial issues, the war in Vietnam was a big draw. It was also a big deal, whether pro and con. There were undergrounds for both, mostly against, but you could make fun of politicians. You could make fun of whatever you wanted. And most of the time, most artists, they were making fun of themselves, like Robert Crumb, who's a very famous underground artist. Most of the time, he was making fun of himself. Most of his comics were autobiographical, so about what a lousy life he had, and he could never score with women, and he was the ugliest guy on earth, which he actually is. But one of the great art talents on earth, actually. But it was just a big explosion of all kinds of stuff in the '60s, from music to fashion to art styles to everything, and undergrounds were just part of that.
And a lot of that started in San Francisco.
That was the hotbed of it, because that's where a lot of the hippies were, a lot of the music scene was in California, and but really undergrounds, there was a small underground group in New York, and Dennis Kitchen started publishing kitchen sink comics in Wisconsin for Tulsa, Oklahoma was not the hotbed of the '60s movement. Okay, so we had a hard time finding underground sometimes. Head shops were about it, and even they'd carry the main books, the Robert Crumb, the Zap comics, and Freak Brothers and things. But if you're looking for more obscure books, you might spend years trying to find them here in this area.
Tales of the Leather Nun.
Tales of the Leather Nun was a famous one. Because there was some good talent in that book. Yeah.
Well, and back then you couldn't just hop on the internet and find them. I mean, you had to.
No, you had to go hunt them down.
You had to physically,
you did.
like you say, ride.
So we would hit we had basically two head shops that would let us go in there and buy comics. I still don't understand how they ever let us get in there and buy them. I mean, they clearly said adults only on them, but
they were probably too high to realize.
The clerks were probably blasted out of their minds and were like, it's just a comic book. Well, let the kid have a comic. He's not buying a pipe, so we're good, Yeah.
I would guess a good chunk of those comics probably never even made it out, or made it too far from where they're actually printed,
They did in the early days. Robert Crumb started out handing them out himself, personally, on the corner of Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. So early issues of original undergrounds can be extremely rare. And like I say, I've never seen a Zap 1 or Zap 0 first print. I've had many people come in the store over the years saying they've had one, but it's never a first print. And so they're extremely rare. And
it'd be kind of hard to really tell if it's a first print anyway, because most of those
they are hard. There are guide. The Kennedy Guide is a good price guide. It actually came out in 1981 as a price guide. It's not much good today, but for the information in it on how to distinguish printings, it's invaluable. And anybody who collects undergrounds knows what the Kennedy Guide is, and so should always try to find one of those if possible, if you're going to collect undergrounds, just because you can distinguish between printings, and you can find out which artists worked on what books and things like that. And besides, the appendix is great because there's pictures of all these underground guys from the period, and some of these people have very few photos of them out there in the world, but this guide has photos of just about everybody in the back, which is nice.
Well, they've also got the Fogels out now too, right?
The Fogel Guide is the more current guide,
okay.
But it cracked me up when I immediately bought the Fogel Guide right away. I was like, wow, a new price guide. Hadn't been a new price guide in 30 plus years. So let me buy the Fogel Guide. And the first paragraph, it says, you should use this guide in conjunction with the Kennedy Guide. So it's like, okay, well, you're going to have the Kennedy Guide anyway. So, which isn't strictly true. The Fogel Guide is good, and it does give much more modern prices. And more modern books, because anything that came out after 1981 isn't even in this guide. So, but this does cover the classic period of undergrounds, which for me is about 1964 to about 1974, which is the true classic period.
You said Robert Crumb is, of course, one of the key players. One
yeah,
that you definitely
he's the most well-known, as kind of the spokesman for the underground world, because he was so famous and is today still. But there were many great talented people who worked in the business, and
I know, and some mainstream artists, we've all liked, like Wrightson did underground stuff.
Yeah,
with Von Vogt.
Richard Corbin started out
Yeah.
in the underground world.
Yeah.
And that's where I first saw him, long before he ever did any Creepy or Eerie or anything else for any other publishers.
Trina Robbins.
Trina Robbins, yeah. Like I say, there are some big name. Like I say, a lot of women artists started there.
Hillary Barda. Hillary Barda.
It's a guy.
Is it a guy? Really? A
He's
guy
like
named
our
Hillary?
age.
A guy named Hillary. Okay.
And
Yeah.
he's our age.
Well, okay.
Yeah,
There were some ladies that actually they did their own comic about women issues.
they did. There's actually a comic called Women's Comics, spelled WIMM. IEN, is that what it is? I'm not sure. Women's Comics, as Popeye would call her. And that's all women artists. Some famous books for sure.
And Yummy for
Yummy Fur didn't come along until the 80s, though, so that's kind of more of a later underground.
Who are some of your favorite key players?
Well, like I say, Crumb and Corbin were my two favorites. Anything that had them in it, I just bought it. And so that included all the Zaps right away. I'd have all them. And Gilbert Shelton is very famous for Freak Brothers. So there are a few. S. Clay Wilson and Spain Rodriguez are also very famous for various reasons. But almost anybody who worked on the Zap comic is famous today, including Victor Moscoso, who's not so well known today, but he certainly was a member of that group, and because his comics were pretty trippy. So
he's the Jim Valentino
yeah,
of Zap Comics,
yes.
the one that everyone forgets was
Yeah,
there at the
that's true.
beginning.
He's the
Yeah,
fifth
yeah.
Beatle.
The fifth Beatle, yeah.
So I know you have a little bit of an underground collection. Are there any undergrounds that are still escaping you?
Oh,
that
yes.
you'd really like to have.
Oh yeah, mostly just because I've never seen them. I really don't know if I'd want them or not. But I've never seen a copy, so I've never been able to look through it to know if it's something I'd want or not. One of my favorite, Flaming Baloney. I mean, who wouldn't want a book called Flaming Baloney? I mean, I know I do, if I can ever find one. And there's a lot of elusive comics and really rare ones out there. Now we have many rare ones. Me and a buddy of mine, we have between us, we have a lot of nice undergrounds, some pretty rare ones too. And prices on them can vary, but mostly what you see is second and third, fourth printings of Zap and things. Zap's so popular, it's reprinted almost every year by Last Gasp. I think they're up to, 38 printings now or something.
I think mine's like a fourth.
Yeah, so early printings are so people come in, like I say, Zap 0 and 1 are really extremely rare, and I tell them, well, this is probably a third printing. Printings 2, 3, and 4 are sort of hard to distinguish between each other there, and they all came out very fast, within a few months of each other. And I tell people, a third printing of Zap number 1 or 0 is not horrible. Okay, it's still a pretty rare, hard to find book. And but first prints are really rare, and I wouldn't mind having those, but I'm not going to pay the price for them. They're all in the 4-figure money today, so that pretty much lets me out. Unless you guys get it for me as a gift.
As a gift. Birthday
I
gift.
think you just dropped a hint.
You said it's 4 figures, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're not getting one.
yeah. So.
Unless two of them are .00.
Yeah, this is a decimal point in there. Yeah. So $10.20, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So about how long did this underground period? How long did it last?
Well,
Started to demise?
really, it still goes today. There are some publishers. Fantagraphics still publishes what you could consider undergrounds. I don't know if there's any hard and fast definition. It's really all about artistic and writer freedom to do what you want without editorial control. And so Fantagraphics has always been good about supporting artists and writers to pretty much do what you feel and do what you like. Most of the publishers are gone today. Last Gasp still publishes, but they tend to publish a lot of reprint material of their classic period. And of course, Dennis Kitchen Sink shut down in '99, so he doesn't publish anymore either. But although he went on to publish a lot more mainstream type books as well. But he started out as an underground publisher in 1969. So
Well, no, we talked about it ended about 74, but and you kind of at today, Love and Rockets, I think it would be considered kind of the early ones, you know.
Yeah, it got kind of hazy there because Star Reach also published in the mid-'70s, and some didn't really consider those underground. So they kind of call them street level or mid-ground type comics. They're not true undergrounders, but probably weren't going to be published by any major publisher like Marvel or DC. But so there's all sorts of gray areas today about what's an underground and what's not. The real key for me is just, do they have control to say whatever it is they want to say?
Right.
Whether it's pro this or con that doesn't really matter, as long as the artist and the writer have 100% freedom to do as they will. And sometimes that leads to really interesting and wonderful comics, and sometimes it leads to disaster. I mean, you let a writer and artist control everything without an editor, and it can get ugly quick for most of them. Which is why publishers have editors, to rein in the crazed talents of their creative teams.
So a lot of times when people hear the term underground comics, the first thing they think of is porn. But
yes, and there actually were books that had plenty of sex in them. Crumb is notorious for drawing lots of sex in his comics, but they weren't primarily straight up porn. I mean, that wasn't what they were for, really. But if you needed to show, some hot sex action, well, you just draw hot sex action and move on with your story, you know. So
probably sell real well.
But most of the time, porn is porn, and they're not really trying to say anything other than other than porn. Exactly. Porn is porn. And what can you say?
Other than pizza delivery boy is the greatest job in the world.
Yeah, and I don't know what that has to say about the war in Vietnam, but But no, it's like I say, it's anything goes with it as far as the art and the stories go. But no, I wouldn't really classify them as porn. But I can understand why people would say that, because if they want to show some naked guys and girls, then they're going to show them. So, but
that wasn't their.
That
goal.
Wasn't the goal. Yeah, they weren't just doing. They most of the time, the writer and the artist, who a lot of times were the same person, what is it they're trying to say? And like I say, Crumb just used his life and experiences he had in his life to tell stories. And sometimes they would do it just to be controversial. There's a story where somebody told Crumb that you can't do incest in comics. You can't do that. That's taboo. There's taboo things that no matter what you're underground or whatever, you can't do them. Well, immediately Crumb went home, started doing a comic about incest because somebody told him you can't do that. So and most of these guys were like that. If you told them that they couldn't do that, well, okay, well, I'll show you. And the next comic that came out from them was all about what you said they couldn't do. So
kind of sounds like
it was breaking. It was breaking taboos and breaking barriers and breaking just anything they could break. There were a lot of angry people in the '60s over this, that, or the other issue. And
someone told Crumb that big asses didn't sell, so what do you do? Big ass comics.
Well, Crumb likes big asses.
Yes, he does. Yes.
He's a big-legged.
Yes.
Well, he likes them big-legged women. Yeah.
So like I said earlier, a lot of them didn't even make it out of the not necessarily out of the state or even maybe out of the town, but the ones that did, how did they?
Well, they
get out of there?
Most of the time, it was literally head shops, and head shops started springing up when people started smoking weed and sundry associated items. Then these stores would open up that catered to that, and they would carry underground comics, and so they would be distributed. Yeah. Well, you'd literally order them from Last Gasp, who was in San Francisco. So you'd see one of their order forms, and you'd order some in. And as they were distributed like any other book, but on a much smaller scale, and not from some national distributor, but you would get them usually straight from the publishers themselves. And there were only 3 or 4 main publishers, so that was most of the, probably 90% of the undergrounds. Now, a lot of people did their own, crank it out on a hand press in your own garage, and there are some rare ones like that as well. Now, most of those are like fanzines today. They're very amateurish, and the thing with the undergrounds is that most of the artists that did them, the big names, Shelton and Crumb and Corbin and Spain Rodriguez and those guys, they had talent. They were talented guys. They could have worked in the mainstream business if they wanted to.
A lot of them did eventually, or
some
were
did,
working
like
in
Corbin.
time.
Corbin did. Corbin, although Corbin always had an undergroundish feel to his work, because Corbin liked drawing lots of naked people. And guys or girls, he was equal opportunity. He didn't care. And
Crumb started working out at Hallmark or something like that, I believe.
It's possible. Crumb did work doing greeting cards, and he did that for a while. And it really actually kind of helped him, because it really helped him hone his art down to these. Because with a card, you basically have one panel on the front and one on the back that's the gag, and it really helped focus his art down to the essentials, and they were always witty. They're very sought after today. You don't see many of the Crumb greeting cards, and most of them have probably been marked on, Happy Birthday Bob or something on them, and so it's rare to find a Crumb greeting card that hasn't been marked on, but it doesn't usually affect the value a whole lot on them, because there's many of them were marked on. But Crumb greeting cards are sought after, and it's that typical sort of Hallmarky kind of humor, when they weren't underground at all. He was doing commercial work for money, and so they were pretty straightforward. Although you can certainly see Crumb's art there, his art style is totally unique, so you can tell it's Crumb as soon as you see it.
There was a documentary where he's living in France now.
Yes.
And he would go to the little coffee shop and whatever and sit outside, and he would sketch on the little napkins.
He still does that.
And he stopped doing it because he found out that the guys at the coffee shop were taking his napkins and putting them up on eBay.
Sure. And original Crumb art sells for rather large amounts of money.
Right.
You look at ads from guys who deal in original art, and almost every one of them, it doesn't matter who they are, will almost say, we'll buy Crumb and we'll buy Frazetta, because those are the two hardest to find original art from, because they don't let it get out to the public by and large. And
Frazetta did. His wife did.
Well, that's true. She was the boss. She was the business person in the family for sure, because Frazetta would have given everything away, including his pants, probably.
You walk into his house and say, "Oh, I like that painting." Well, here, take it.
You just have it. And she put a stop to that.
Yeah.
So today, the Frazetta Museum has really most of, probably 80% of his work is still in that museum. You can go visit it. I would love to do that someday. These pictures I've seen are awesome.
So if somebody came in today and they wanted to get into the underground comics, where would you?
Well, you do, and you get a few, and especially it's been curious to me lately. It's been a lot of guys, early 20s type guys that I don't know how they heard about undergrounds or how they know about it. Maybe they saw the Crumb movie, or maybe they have seen the 35th edition of Zap number 3 or something, and. But most of the time when people look for undergrounds, I point them in the direction of the main books, Zap and Freak Brothers, and that's usually because they're the most famous books, and that's usually the ones they're looking for anyway. And then most of the creators in Zap are all famous too, so you can point them out to lead them to other books. If you want. If you're looking for S. Clay Wilson, you can go, find Ruby the Dyke or some of his other creations and other publications too. But you don't get a lot of people looking for him today. It is still really rather a niche thing in the comic world. Because most of the people who remember those books are all like me. They're all in their 60s now or older. And but occasionally you get some young fellows in. I have a couple that come into the store and they still want to look at old undergrounds, and but most people have no clue on undergrounds. And but we didn't either as kids. We just bought whatever looked good to us on the stands, and most of the time not knowing who the creators were. It just looked interesting. So I'm going to take this home and read it. A lot of times they were really well done, and a lot of times they were not. So, and then you learn the names like you do in the regular comic world. Ooh, I love this guy's art. If I see this guy do something else, I'm going to buy it. And that's kind of how it is, just like it in the regular comic world. One comic kind of leads you to another.
So, you've already mentioned Flaming Baloney. What are some of the other comic titles?
Well, one I would love to find, and I know what it looks like. But it came with a record album. There was a band in Houston, which shows you that comics could be done. Undergrounds could have been done anywhere. Yeah, many of them were done in San Francisco, and some in Milwaukee, and others in New York. But if you had a hand crank press and you wanted to do a comic, you could do it in Boca Chica, Oklahoma, if you wanted to. But there was a band in Houston.
Outside Ponca City?
That's outside Ponca City, somewhere about south of Ponca City. Yeah.
Boca Chica.
But anyway, you would a band in Houston called Shiva's Headband, and when you bought the record album, it came with a comic book inside. That was supposedly beautiful. I've never seen it, so I've seen the cover, and I know that's beautiful, but I've never seen the inside. So I've been looking for Shiva's Headband for years. I've got the album on CD. I've never been able to find an actual copy of the record.
How's the album?
It's awesome.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a great
psych?
60s psychedelic kind of, especially because Texas had a great music scene anyway, so almost anything from the Austin, Houston, Dallas triangle, any bands from that period, from that area, are usually worth listening to, and they were no different.
So, I was kind of saying, like, they had some crazy names
Oh yeah,
on
a
the
bunch of
comics.
crazy
So, outside of Flaming Baloney, what are some of the other good ones that crack you up when you...
Yeah, most of the ones that come... a lot of 80s ones had great names. Poop Jelly. I mean, you can't beat Poop Jelly. I don't know what Poop Jelly is, but there was a book called Poop Jelly, and Satan's Anal Bullwhip is always a good one to get. And
Satan's Sodomy Baby.
Satan's a little more recent stuff there, but yeah, there are a lot of good names, but most were pretty straightforward. They'd be, Crumb used to have the best ones, and most of the good names he wouldn't even use. They're all in his sketchbooks. He would come up with these splash pages for books that. So if you ever get a chance to, like I say, Crumb's one of my personal favorites, so as he is for most people. But his sketchbooks are almost as interesting as any comic he ever produced, because they're just so full of many ideas that he never really fulfilled, but it's got all the Crumb touches, so some of them are great. But Insect Fear, Slow Death, Skull Comics, that's a good one. So there, a lot of names.
My favorite was always Tales of the Leather Nun.
Tales of the Leather Nun. Can't beat Tales of the Leather Nun. Or one of the great women's comics, Tits and Clits. You can't get more direct than that. I wonder what that book's about, Mom. Yeah.
So, are there any books that are coming out now, like Satan's Sodomy Baby, that could be considered undergrounds?
Yeah.
Or have that underground feel to them?
Yeah. I'm sure it's changed a lot. Like I say, I think the real key is if the editors at the publishers let the guys have creative freedom, then I guess technically any book could be an underground book. But the real key to me is that the writer/artist has total freedom to do whatever they want.
You don't seem to get a lot of that underground feel.
No, you don't get a lot of the underground feel today. But really, most of the causes that they all supported, it was driving it back in the day. There were the teenagers were very angry. Well, many of them, all the males were getting shipped to Vietnam. That wasn't so good at the time, and some of them didn't come back. So a lot of teens were angry over that. A lot of teens were angry over, especially women were angry. The women's movement really took off from that point. Even though it had been going for decades, it got an extra boost in that decade. The 60s was a very important decade, and for everything, music, fashion, politics. Some of the movements still go today. Like I say, the women's movement still is rolling on, and racial equality as well, and environmental type issues. Those were all big in the time, and they're still going today. But if somebody had something to say about the way we're cutting down all the trees in the rainforest in Brazil, hey, you could do a comic about it. And today, publishing is the hard part today. But with the internet, my guess is you don't need a publisher today.
Right.
You just pop it online, and now I don't know how you get people to view it, but most of the underground's spread by word of mouth anyway. So it wouldn't shock me if that would work in the internet age as well. But my guess is if you've got something to say and you want to say it, and you can put pencil to paper and make it interesting for other people, even people who don't see the same view as you do, then you can do an undergrounder yourself. Anybody can do it. You just got to have the want to. And but you're right. The classic feel, the classic period, the classic age to me, it was that 64 to 74 period. And after that, even though Crumb still put books out after 74, and many of them are classics. But
Freak Brothers ran long after.
Freak Brothers still ran. Gilbert Shelton, I think, I don't know, he did up into the late 80s. He was still doing new stories. It seems like he did one recently. They did finally produce the last issue, supposedly, of Zap. I can't remember the number, 18 or 19, I believe. About a year or two ago. And they had all the old guys were still alive, and they all contributed to the book. So as far as the classic period over, I guess that Zap, the last issue of Zap, probably closed that out, if it hadn't been closed out already some decades ago. But you're right. The underground, there's no real feel that the underground period had. It was a real creative and fertile period, and there were many people who tried it. Today you get an odd person will do something, or maybe a group of people will do something, but there doesn't seem to be that urgency amongst, say, the youth of today to get out there and say something. They do it all on social media and all that today. So, in that sense, it's different. So, but
Twitter killed underground.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case or not.
Well,
but it doesn't seem like nobody wants to put pen to paper anymore. Publishing is dying. The internet has killed publishing, and that also makes it difficult to try to produce an art-driven book, because publishers aren't looking for undergrounds. They're not looking. They want something that's going to be mass-produced and can sell to the masses and make a profit. And most of the time, these guys weren't making a profit.
Right, it was expensive to publish a book back then.
It was,
and it's expensive to publish a book now.
So
why not
even more?
Use the internet?
There's a lot less publishers today.
Well, and like we were saying, though, you could put do a web comic, and like with today's political.
Yeah. But as you guys know, there are lots of web comics.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And many of them are, oh my God, they should be erased immediately. They are really horrible. There are some really bad ones out there. And
a lot of the good ones, though, find their way into.
They do, and most of the time that probably happens by people, telling somebody else, "Hey, you should check this out. This is a really good one." And so word of mouth can spread pretty quick, And I do understand that some of the better web comics do get printed in hard copies today, and which is good. We should always try to save the cream and let the doo-doo sink to the bottom. So, and I'm sure a lot of web comics are, oh, look at little Jenny. She's 8 years old and she's drawn a little stick figure comic with little sparkly horses, and oh, how exciting! And that's fine for the family consumption, but is that going to make a good web comic for the masses to? No. That will not. So, but
I know, like you say, the '60s, the political and all that.
Yeah,
now,
but today, politics marches on,
Yeah.
and there's always some cause or other out there. And like I say, if anybody gets a bee in their bonnet about it bad enough, and you want to say something about, say, President Trump, and then go for it.
I don't think the youth today have the attention span to do a comic.
Oh, no.
It takes all they've got to do a tweet.
Not that stoneheads in the '60s, once you hit Mr. Bong, had much attention span either. But the beauty of the old classic undergrounders was they were entertaining, if nothing else. I mean, you may not agree with what he was saying, but they were going to be good humor, and you were going to see stuff you couldn't see in other comics. So when Crumb's talking about getting a blowjob, well, guess what? He's going to show somebody getting a blowjob. Okay, well, you can't. A lot of people are not going to do that today, and really, like I say, part of it was just useful. You say we can't do this, so we're going to do it. Well, how many taboos are left anymore? Most of the taboos have been broken already a long time ago. So I don't know how many taboos there are to break anymore. Yeah. But I'm sure if there are, some enterprising guy will find it out there.
Well, the guy in Florida, his sentence was that he was no longer allowed to hold a pencil or a crayon or a marker.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
What was his name?
Because they didn't like his subversive drawings or something?
Yeah, I can't remember his name, though.
There was a lot of... there were children drawn, there were animals drawn, there were incest drawn.
Okay.
And so,
it was back in the late
it was
90s.
pretty sick stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, a lot of people would say Crumb is sick.
Yeah.
Although, like I say, Crumb's stuff isn't quite. In fact, it's really entertaining because he has a great sense of humor. So, and many women would find his comics offensive today. In the modern world, but it's because everybody has to be PC or whatever, and which sometimes limits creativity, I think, a bit. But
something you did say though, I think a lot of the modern publishers could take a lesson from was, even if you didn't agree with what the guy said, it was still entertaining.
Yeah. Publishing is a business, though, and the bottom line is you gotta sell. You gotta sell more than it costs to print, and that's a hard thing to convince editors of. They don't want to put up with the social media blast avalanche they're going to get if they do something controversial, and because the blue noses out there will be relentless in emailing and social media and trashing your company, and you guys are sleazebags and blah blah blah. And you didn't have a lot of that in the old days. Publishers put it out. If it sold, it sold, and if it didn't, it didn't, and they went on to something else. Today, every little thing gets scrutinized down to the, and you have groups who really aren't in a position to be judging what's art or what isn't. But it offends me. The old days, people had a lot thicker skin. If somebody said something to you and you didn't like, well, you let it go and you moved on, unless he's trying to get in your face and shove it down your throat, and then you would say a few words. But today, anybody finds something offensive that somebody said 20 years ago, oh my God, how dare he? And so it's like nobody has any tough hide anymore. They got to get on social media and make it a big issue. Is it a big issue? Probably not. It seems to be to this person, but most people are going to be like, get a thicker skin, man, and move on with life.
Kind of like the Oklahoma City broadcaster the other night.
I don't know. What's that about?
He said that Russell Westbrook was playing out of his cotton-picking mind.
Yeah.
And
so somebody took that as a racial thing?
Yes.
That sounds about right.
Now he's being dubbed a racist.
I got you. Yeah. So, yeah. That's why I say everybody scrutinizes everything everybody says, even though they it's not what they meant. But I will say, if you're going to do undergrounds and you're going to go to the edge and you're going to peek over the edge, then you should go for it. Yeah. But you have to make it entertaining. It can't be. You
can't just preach at people.
No, Marvel is finding that out themselves with their own editorial slant over the last few years. If people want to be preached at, they'll go to Sunday school. Okay, so why don't you tell an entertaining story and slip in an idea here or there? Marvel had no trouble doing that for 50, 60 years, but today they seem to be caught up in listening to social media when most people should be not listening to social media, because most of the people who are on social media have no clue what they're talking about to begin with. So, and Marvel, you're in business to publish and sell books. If this doesn't help you sell books, then why are you catering to the social media people? They don't buy your books anyway. So, and that's the way I think a lot of the old underground publishers felt about it. Hey, you don't want to buy our book? Then don't buy our book. But we're going to put it out there for people who do want to buy it. And it's what America is all about, freedom of the press. You don't want to buy it, then don't buy it.
The undergrounds, I don't think those guys were all that worried about making money.
No, in fact, they
just make enough money to make another issue.
Yeah. And that's true. Like I say, a lot of the guys, it wasn't about money, it wasn't about, they just had something to say about whatever. It could have been the war or drugs or racial stuff. What didn't matter? Why? If you wanted something and had something to say and could do it in a semi-entertaining manner, then go for it. And if the rest of the world didn't like it, oh well, they didn't have to buy it, did they? And unfortunately, we're not there anymore. Now people feel that not only will I not buy it, I'm going to go try to get this crushed and get it eliminated from ever having existed at all. Those are the kind of people that start burning books like Hitler used to do. So if you don't buy it, then don't buy it. Don't support it. But that doesn't mean you can't be telling somebody else what they should be reading. And that's the end of my soapbox speech.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that was a good one. That was a good
That's
speech.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it reflected a lot of what a lot of fans are trying to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not very articulate, but I just see too many people getting too bent out of shape over issues that really aren't all that critical, and when they should be concentrating more on what they're doing, what's in front of them at any given moment. So trying to tell somebody what they should read or what they should watch or what they should be is just a waste of time, if that's what you want to be, then be that, but you can't put somebody on and burn them at the stake because they don't believe like you do. And that's the end of my soapbox speech, part 2.
Okay.
Because we live in America, the greatest
We
country
live in
the history
America,
of the
my
world.
God.
Yeah.
If you want to buy it, buy it. And if you don't want to buy it, then shut up and don't buy it.
Amen.
But don't tell somebody else they can't,
There you go.
Yeah. End of story.
All right.
Soapbox 3.
End of soapbox part 3. Yeah.
You got another soapbox for him?
No, but I'm all out of questions.
You're good?
Right?
Okay.
Anybody else?
No?
I've
You
said
got
mine.
anything, Carrington?
Just like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm over here playing on my phone. Leave me alone.
Well, I guess wrap it up then.
Sure.
All right. You gonna wrap it up?
Well, just once again, just want to say thanks to Mike for coming on and talking about
Oh, yeah.
underground books. We're
Glad
hoping
to.
we would like to have you on one more time.
It's good to get down in my own basement
Yeah.
occasionally. Yeah.
We would like to have you on later for another little chapter, sort of a history of a comic history of Comic Empire
Sure.
later on. I think it'd be interesting.
Well, there's 41 years of history, so there's a little bit.
42 this year.
Yeah, I will be 40. That's true. I'm working on 42 very quickly.
Thanks for coming in, and this is Terry for Comic Book Straight Talk.
This is Dalian,
Kenny.
Harrington.
and we'll see you all later.
Thanks.